questions, a very special Hall of Fame edition of Burning Questions. My name is Lachlan Mitchell, and ahead of Saturday night's Hall of Fame ceremony, where 6 new inductees will join these 3 gentlemen into the Hall of Fame, we have assembled an all-star cast to go back into the history pages and talk through their lives and their journeys. It gives me great honor to start with Brian Gath. Brian, welcome to Burning Questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for calling in.
You've got quite the record. It's a bit sketchy, but you've driven over 3,600 winners, 1978 Intervenian with Markovina, and the 1992 Miracle Mile with Franco Tiger. It's a fantastic resume, Brian. Is there something that sticks out?
No, I enjoy all the wins, as Lance and Bruce know. If you win a maiden somewhere, you feel like you've achieved something. But, higher up the ranks to the Group 2s and 3s, they're all wonderful. And the Group 1s, well, that's another level. But, no, they're all good. Don't you worry. I love every win I've had.
Yeah, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it. We'll jump over to Bruce Clarke as well, who will join us on behalf of Gammalite, who was inducted in 2009 and then elevated in 2021. He had 179 starts for 94 wins and 53 seconds. Was the first horse to earn over $1 million. And he was driven 65 times by Bruce Clarke. Bruce, you drove him 65 times. Was there ever a chance that you were getting off him?
Oh, absolutely not. It was a great achievement to get the drive on Gammalite. He was trained by a close friend of ours, Leo O'Connor, who only lived a couple of kilometres from where we are now. And Leo said to me, would you like to have a drive on him? I couldn't get there quick enough, actually. And once I won my first start with him, and then I won 10 straight. So I was virtually glued to the seat from there on.
And last but certainly not least, Lance Justice, 2023 Gordon Rockica medalist, inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2022, 3,500 wins as a trainer, 19 Group 1s. He also trained more than 3,000 winners as a driver, 4 SA Cups, and equal the record of none other than Gammalite. Lance, that's a pretty impressive achievement. Anything you didn't tick off in that?
Not really. It's just like I just say what Ryan said. It doesn't matter where you win; they're all good. And Gammalite was one of my favourite horses. When I was young, I used to watch Bruce winning him at Globe Derby and the SA Cups, and he just loved the joint. Big chestnut favourite. I always loved it. What can I say?
Yeah, fantastic. Now, there's a lot of history in this meeting, and it certainly will dig deeper into that. Just our first sponsor for tonight is Pride's Easy Feed. Pride's Easy Feed stands as a proud supporter of harness racing industry with their set recipes and quality ingredients to give the trainer confidence in what they're feeding. So make the switch to Pride's and start getting the results you've been chasing. Our first question is, I assembled 3 from the Hall of Fame, but when was that moment you lit that winning flame? We might start with you, Lance. What was the first winner that you had, and can you talk us through it a little bit?
The first winner I had was on a trotter, Cadena, a little place, a 600-metre track. I was in front by about 35 metres with a left go, and I won by a short up.
Yeah.
But, it was one of those catch me if you can type jobs. I was well out of gas, Jennifer home.
Yeah, lovely. Brian, have you got a story on your first winner?
Oh, well, it was for my father, and it was owned by Pearl Kelly, the famous Pearl Kelly. She lived down the road, lovely lady, and it was at Stall, and it was a trotter. Minyip Wheat was his name. God, I had that many strings to pull. Dad said I had to get him away, and then in long half hobbles, but then I had to pull him up 4 or 5 holes just after the start. Wasn't easy to do. I think then I had a high head check with, as Lance and O in Adelaide, that Dad probably learnt from Wavell days. You used to have the head checks real high with a pin, and once they trotted away, you let the head down a bit. Had to pull that out. And I think I had earplugs as well. I eventually got them all out, and I won. So that was my first winner at Stall many years ago.
Lovely. And Bruce, do you have a winner? The first time, obviously, you won on Gammalite. Do you remember that? And the first winner you had as a driver?
Well, the first winner as a driver, I drove a horse called Peter Nutty, and it was a very difficult name for the broadcaster to say. He gave up in the finish, and he said, "Look, I'll just call him Peter Pineapple. It'll be the easiest way." But he was a very difficult horse to drive because he continually pig rooted, and as soon as you took a hold of it, he'd start bucking. So, but anyway, this night I got him away, and I duly won. But the next start I came out, and he performed very poorly, and he tipped me out. So my second drive wasn't as good as the first one.
Yeah, fantastic. There's plenty of stories there. Lance, sort of going back to what Brian was saying there, was it a bit of a different sort of, he was mentioning the head checks and things like that. Was there a bit of a different time? Obviously, you've driven in sort of different eras and things like that, but how have sort of things changed in that respect?
Look, I can remember the old stories when Brian's dad come across to trade a Wavell trade, and he used to play smallful tricks. He would work the horses in the dark, and people wouldn't see him work, and they'd all be watching to see how the great George trained his horses. And he had lots of tricks like that. I would say that your dad probably invented the hobble shortener, didn't he, Brian?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He invented them, yeah. Actually, he had them going for a fair while before anyone knew anything about them. He had them rigged up, though, was just made by fishing line, and he wasn't sure whether he'd be allowed to use them, but I was using them one night at the showgrounds, and my horse galloped away and broke his hobbles. Then the stewards come and took the hobbles away to have a look at them, how they broke, and all these tangled up fishing lines. I had to try to explain it. It was very hard to explain. The steward didn't understand what I was saying, but then not long after that, they started making them and selling them to everybody, and revolution the game, getting them away. You start off the hobbles up about 6 holes, and you go a few strides and let them out, and away you go. Stopped a lot of horses galloping at the start.
Yeah, look, I can remember all those stories, and your dad, he was terrific that way. He was ahead of his time, really, when you think about it. And I've always sort of tried that sort of thing myself too. I've always been one to try and experiment, make equipment, and sort of try and work out things. I sort of I take credit for the Murphy blinds a little bit. I sort of started using them well before anybody else did. The hoods with the holes in them, the peekaboo holes. I was doing that back when I first started training, and people would say these hoods are no good. They've got holes in them. Well, they've got holes in them for a reason, but Albie Holberton used to be a great one like that, and I sort of learned off him a fair bit because I used to drive when I first started for Albie Holberton a little bit. John drove for him a lot. But you'd get on a horse with him, and you'd have stuff like he would have a blind with silver paper stuck inside of it, so that would reflect and stuff like that. And you'd be round to the start. And in the old days, as you know, Brian, they used to hold him at the start. To sometimes you'd have a horse held, and he'd pick up a piece of dirt and put it in the horse's mouth. So if it was a bad beginner, so the horse would be chewing on the dirt, so I wouldn't be worrying about the start so much. And then away it'd go, and spit the dirt out. But everybody used to he was always trying to outthink the horses, and I've always tried to do that too. And I know your dad used to do it, and probably all the good old trainers, Bruce, used to do that sort of stuff.
And excuse me, and a lot of credit goes to Red Shin. He invented the tube spreaders, Lance. Remember that? Used to blow the tube up.
I remember those. I remember when he did it when the first time he had them on. And I also remember Dad trying to do it, and they couldn't get the tubes to pump up tight enough, and they kept getting punches, and they'd go down halfway through the.
Took a bit of experiment.
Yeah. Brian, I want to take you back a bit to 1960 when Caduceus won the Inter Dominion. I've heard this is the moment that you sort of thought, I would love to win an Inter Dominion. What was sort of special about that night?
Oh, well, there was 52,000 people there for a start. I never seen, I was only very young those days, and Caduceus was stabled at Glebe in Hereford Street at Sam Agger's place, and Dad had heroic action in that series, and so I got to meet Jack Litton, and he actually asked my brother Neville and I to help strap the horse on that night, so I wheeled the cart up the hill, that steep hill at Errol Park with all the gear, and I was there the night that Caduceus won. I always thought, marvellous, I just had in my back of my mind or my heart that one day I want to win one of these,
Fantastic. That leads us on to our next question. All three stars tasted into Dominion glory. So what was special about that winning story? We might go with you, Bruce. I mean, we won't want to touch on a couple later on, but that first one in '83 with Gammalite, that would have been something special for you.
It absolutely was, to travel to New Zealand and to race against the top horses over there and the drivers. I was awesome to look at the drivers like Peter Wolfenden and those drivers from New Zealand. They were just complete horsemen, and it was a great honour to go over there and race against them. We came through the series, kept running a place. On the middle night, there was a downpour of rain, and they turned the mobile race into a standing start. And usually Gammalite was a terrific beginner from the standing starts, but this night he just didn't go away quite well. But he still ran fifth in that heat. So then it was important that in his last heat that he ran in a forward position so that he qualified for the final. And as it turned out, we were racing against our arch rival Popular Arm, and Popular Arm drew number 1 and we drew number 2. And in many of the races we raced outside the horses in the races in the death seat, and because that was Gammalite's forte, was to wear all the horses down. But anyway, this particular Inter-Dominion, we made the plan beforehand that Popular Arm was a good beginner and I was going to get in behind, and it wasn't to the satisfaction of the stewards. I did get a fortnight after it, but I deliberately had to get in behind Popular Arm. So we trailed him throughout the race, and we duly come to the outside of him and beat him in the straight.
There's a sense that Popular Arm beat Gammalite 13 out of 16 occasions. Do you find that Gammalite sort of knew that there was an occasion happening here, and he lifted for you a little bit there, Bruce?
Well, he certainly did. Popular Arm was a horse that was a brilliant horse, and he was great for the industry at the particular time. He was very exciting. But Gammalite's forte was that when he got into a carnival, he continued to get better and better as the carnival proceeded, and that were the times when we got the closest to Popular Arm, and on this occasion in New Zealand we were able to beat.
Brian, looking at 1978 here with Mark Avina, what's your recollections of that really special day? I was actually having a chat to Andy Gath a couple of weeks ago, and he sort of said he was there, and there was a bit of a holding your breath there because you had a bit of a protest with Hermosa Star. But your thoughts on that special day?
Yeah, well, it was a very special day, and he came through the series really well. And on the night, he peaked, I think, because he was going out onto the track. He was on his hind legs, whinnying out to the crowd and kangaroo hopping all the way under the tunnel. He just couldn't have felt any better. But we knew during the week that he'd come through the series very, very good. My brother Neville said it's probably the best thing we've ever yoked up. I said, oh, gee, don't tell me that, But he won very well. I had a good trip in the run, and I knew if I had that good trip, I was going to be awfully hard to beat. And I just had to be careful not to hit the front too early, because he had a tendency when he'd chase all day and pass everybody, and then he'd think the job was done. He'd want to slow down, ease down, and by that. And then sometimes they'd get close to me, so I had to be very careful not to go to the front too early. And then when he did hit the front, he veered out a bit, and the horse that ran second got carted out a little bit, but not very much. I held him off quite good, so then I had to withstand a protest. So I had to win it twice, but there wasn't much chance of losing it. But I remember that night, and because it was something that I always wanted to win, and my father and all my uncles and my brothers tried so hard to win an Inter-Dominion. I think Dad ran second and places and things like that, and it all come to a head that night when we won. The whole family was there, my wife and my brothers and sisters and family, mother. It was just the most wonderful night. I'll never forget it.
I actually had a chat to owner Colin Croft probably about 2 months ago in regards to it, and he sort of remembered George being there and yourself being there, Brian. The impact it has on the owners and those sort of wider communities of harness racing must be so special for you that you could deliver on his sort of promise and wish.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I was just so proud of being there to win it for Dad and everyone, and Colin and everyone involved. We were that concerned to get into the horse to the track properly. If nothing would go wrong, we left early. We went in out my truck. I took him in his truck. He always travelled on his own in a truck, and Dad followed in a float in case it broke down. We're making sure we got it there safely, I tell you. Yeah, no, it was a great night.
Fantastic. And Lance, you've sort of told me a couple of times that the Gammalite was one of your favourite horses. What made him so special as someone who never got to drive him, but you sort of saw him go around?
Oh, look, Gammalite was special. I had quite a few when I first started. I mean, I was a bit behind Brian and Bruce, I think. So I was watching Brian when he was driving Mark and those sort of horses. And I love Mark Idle, but I love Pure Steel. And then Gammalite come along, and he was like Pure Steel, just as strong, but he was chestnut, and he was a good looking horse, and he was not long after Paleface Adios, so he was he was a group of great horses around. And listening to Bruce talk about the Gammalite, and it's right, Gammalite, all the good horses are usually measured by the company you have to race against. And like you look at a horse like Gammalite, Mark Avina, and you look at the quality horses they had to race against at the time. I mean, because Mark Avina had Koala King, he had Pure Steel, he had Paleface Adios, Gammalite had Popular Arm, and you go through some of the later or the more modern day horses, and you look at who they raced against, and you think, if just took one of those horses and put them in that time slot, how much better? Like even John had Shaker Maker and Safe and Sound. He had them at the same time. How unlucky was he to have those two good horses at the same time? I was a bit lucky as I had Sokiola, and then after that, Smoking Up come along. They didn't race together. They were just after each other. So, and they both, like, you look at Smoking Up's history, he had to race against Blake's a Fake, those sort of horses, and Mr. Feelgood and all, top horses. So I always look at the company they keep and measure what they had to race against to their greatness.
Yeah, fantastic insight there. Well, just before moving on to our next question, Logical Staffing Solutions provides labour hire and recruitment services to the transport, warehousing, automotive and manufacturing industries. A logical solution for your staffing needs. Our next question goes, Lance and Bruce made history, so let's untangle that mystery. Lance, I'm going to take you back, and I'm not going to take you back too far, but 30th of April 2011, Smoking Up goes 148.5, and he's the first pacer outside of America to break that 150 barrier. Looking back on that, was that always going to happen going into it? I know we've sort of discussed it a little bit, but that remarkable feat, and looking back for you, Lance, how does that sit with you?
Look, it didn't feel like it was always going to happen. It felt like that he was probably the most logical horse to do it because he'd been running around the 150 for his Group 1 races. But it's, as Brian and Bruce will tell you, it's very hard to go out there and say, I'm going to smash a track record, because at some stage you tend to leave yourself vulnerable. So I was just lucky that I worked really hard, got the lead, and it was the Len Smith Mile, and my dad was Mr. Feelgood, and he was outside of me. And coming to the 700-metre mark, he started to struggle. And I thought there was a good field, the rest were good horses, but I actually said to Smoke Up, he wanted to run. He really wanted to run at the 600. And I said to him, look, don't you let me down if I let you go, because there's nothing worse than going too early, as these two champions will tell you, and then getting beaten the last couple of strides because you've left home too early. So I let him. He hung me out to dry. We got going, and he just felt good and smashed it. And it was probably one of the highlights of my career, because when I come back to the scales, usually when you win a race, as Brian and Bruce tell you, you get quite a few people there watching, but everybody was at that track edge applauding the horse for breaking the 150. There were trainers that I admired were coming up saying that's I never thought I'd see this happen in Australia. So it was huge. I was chuffed. I was pretty happy about it. I was proud of the horse.
Yeah, incredible. And Bruce, Gammalite was the first horse to break that $1 million mark. How do you sort of reflect on that sort of career, I suppose?
Well, his career, it speaks for himself. Like a horse that's won 94 races and he won $1.4 million in stakes. And well, if he was racing today and the money that they're racing for today, he would have won over $4 million in stakes. We assessed that, Leo and I, at one stage, because there's so much more money on offer at this particular time. But back in those times, when Gammalite, he raced from a 2-year-old to a 7-year-old, and it was actually Alan Galloway that convinced Leo there was a stud career ahead of Gammalite, and he was retired early. But Leo said after that the horse, he was as sound as a bell all the way through his career, and he felt there was another couple of seasons in him at the top level if he hadn't gone to stud. And to be honest about it, he wasn't very successful at stud when he went. Whether he was too shy or what it was, but he still could have raced on. So look, his career was sensational. When you look at it, he won 26 cups, and they were at the top level. And as Lance would agree with, he won 4 South Australian Cups over there. I didn't drive him for every one of them. My brother Neville drove one of them, but he won in every state of Australia except New South Wales. He won the best races, and then he went to New Zealand. He won the Auckland Cup. 6 days later, he flew back to Melbourne. He won the Hunter Cup. He was just a super horse in himself, that he could have a hard race. Within 3 days, he was ready to go again. He had an iron constitution. You could tie him up to a gum tree and he would eat his feed and what have you. So therefore, he could perform all over Australasia at the top level and perform at his best.
An incredible feat. And thank you for reflecting on that, Bruce. Our next question, Brian. Brian took out the Miracle Mile. Was that the special moment that made you smile? I gave you a call just before your birthday, Brian, and you said when Franco Tiger took out that Miracle Mile, it was pretty special for you. Inter Dominions, Vic Cups, Hunter Cups, but Miracle Mile with Franco Tiger sits above?
Tremendous to win that Miracle Mile, because I had a few goes at it. I even got to drive Chokem. He was favourite and he fell over coming into the straight, and I thought, well, I think that's probably, I've had me shot and it never come off. I didn't think it had happened, and I drove Franco Tiger a couple of times in the Miracle Miles, and then the night he won the Miracle Mile was a big run. He won quite comfortably. He's a very special horse, Franco Tiger.
Lance, reflections on the Miracle Mile? You've obviously won one. How do you sort of look back through the pages on that one?
I think it's always been the greatest sprint race in Australia. And I've always, Craven A, when I started watching, it was Craven A built a Miracle Mile. And if you go back through the history of it, I just thought to be part of that race. I mean, first time I went in with Whirly Dream, and he drew barrier 6, Village Kid drew 1. So I was pushing uphill. But like Brian said, the hardest thing, I remember Brian saying this one day, the hardest thing about the Miracle Mile was the race. Once you get in there, Stokiola, he was the last horse invited into the Miracle Mile. He was the outsider of the field and drew barrier 5. And because the horse hadn't drawn the front row for so long, that everybody seemed to forget about his gate speed. And they called me in for a pre-race interview. They were talking about what my tactics would be, and I didn't want to tell Sam Nadai and those guys what I was doing, because I didn't want to alert the other drivers that I was actually going to try and pounce on them at the start. And what I remember about that was Soki used to have a bad habit of getting to the first turn and just laying on top of everybody. It wasn't crossed. if he wasn't cross and he was 3 parts cross, he thought he could get across.
Yeah.
So I looked at the sign on the track and I worked out there's a Qantas sign. I worked out if I aimed him from barrier 6 to between the A and the S on the end of the word, that'll put me 2.5 to 2 3/4 carts off, and that's as close as I can get to him, just in case I was going to get close, because I didn't want to be the first driver to knock the field over the American Mile. And I charged out and I zipped across and double identity that quick that they didn't know what happened, and that's the end of it. And then down the back straight in that race, the last time, the favourite was the Falcon Strike, and he was outside of me, and he was a hot favourite. And we're getting to about the 400, 450, and he was struggling. And I thought, I'm a chance to win this. And I nearly went for home, and I thought, no, I remember what Granddad used to always say, when you think you're going to kick and you're in front, take a breath, count to 3, have a look around, then go. Make sure nothing's coming at you. So, and I did that, and I won by 1.5 meters. He held him off nice up straight. So, yeah, it was fantastic. And then after I won, it was like a feeling going back to scales. I was thinking, I've done it. I've done something that I never thought I'd do. And I just sort of sat up in the cart and thought, how good is this? My name's going to be in the history books of winning American Mile. And that's a fantastic feeling.
Absolutely. If I was to come over to your houses, gents, is the trophies and everything like that really present? Is it sort of the first thing you do? You put it up on the mantelpiece? I might start with you, Bruce, on that one. Where's the Inter-Dominion trophy? Where do you keep it now?
We do have some here, but Leo had an extensive cabinet where he had so many trophies at that time. But we do have some nice trophies here.
And yourself, Brian, is it on the mantelpiece above the telly?
No, not really. No, we don't. Not really. I've got no, hardly any trophies around. Just memories, a few photos.
And yourself, Lance?
I sort of got boxes of them out in the shed because I moved up to the land. But I pulled a few good ones, but like they need dusting all the time, so it's really hard. So, but I went out to Colin Croft's place a couple of months ago, Brian, and he's got every trophy that Mark Avino just won, just about.
Oh, okay.
all Shokiolas. And he was talking to the boys, and he said when he eventually leaves this earth, he's penciled them in for me to take charge of them. And I looked at him and I thought, there's a lot of dusting there. And yeah, it's amazing. They're good to have, but I think like Brian and Bruce, you like to have them, but you don't like to show them off too much because they're special, and people are awed by them, but it's almost, you feel like you're being a little bit boasting if you show the trophy, and I don't do that. I mean, I think it's fantastic, and we appreciate them, we love them, but you don't have them everywhere. I mean, I haven't got the American Mile photos on the wall, partly because I've moved, but I sort of, it's great. It's a great honour to win them, and I know I won them, and it's amazing.
Absolutely. Just moving on to our next question. This one's for you, Bruce. Gammalite and Popular Arm was a rivalry for the ages, so let's look back through the history pages. The relationship with you and Vinny Knight after you beat him in that Inter-Dominion, how was the sort of wash-up after that?
Oh, no, it was quite good. It was I wasn't a close friend of Vinny's, but no, he was very respectful on the racetrack, and he'd congratulate you after, and I'd congratulate him. So, no, it was a great rivalry at the time, and it was exciting for everybody in the industry to see it happening.
For you, Brian, it was the one sort of thing that Vinny never got his hands on an Inter-Dominion. You had quite a strong relationship, wasn't it?
Yeah, good friends with Vinny. I had a lot of good times with him. But I remember coming home from Perth. I ran last with Rivoli Jack in that, and young Judy won it, but and Vinny he had the other horse, good horse in it as well. So, and we come home on the plane together. Oh, we had a great night coming home on the plane. nearly the plane was full of people who had been to the end of the Dominion. I remember we got to the airport. We got a taxi to the airport after the last race, and he said, "Where you sitting?" I said, "Down the back." He said, "No, you're not." He said, "Up the front with me." I said, "No, it's too dead." No, he went up and he shouted at me, the extra to get on the plane. We sat on the front, and the air hostess, he had a way with women, of course, and he had them making us cocktails or some, gee, they were strong. And after we had a couple, Vinny said, "You notice something?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "These cocktails and just taste like lemonade now, don't they?" We weren't too flashed when we got off the plane, but we celebrated good for Vinny that night. It was wonderful. Oh, and then we had to get on a plane next day and fly to Bathurst for the Bathurst Gold, and we weren't too flash when we got there, but we brightened up, and I had a couple of winners. Vinny got suspended that night in Perth, and he said, if you think any of these horses are driving, come and tell me. He said, "I'll be the punter tonight." So Donny Guy had one in. He said, "I think it'll win," and it won. Said to Vinny, "You better back it." And he backed it, and I drove another winner too. I think I might have drove a heat of the Bathurst Gold for Tubby Peace. Anyway, yeah, we had another good night. Then we had to try and get home. We weren't too flash when we got home. I boiled my car coming from the airport. I had to drop Vinny off actually at Kilburn, drive on to Bendigo, and I wasn't feeling. I felt a bit second hand. And time I got to, I didn't realise my car was getting hot, and I blew the motor at Heathcote, and they had to come and get me. I remember that. It was a great weekend with Vinny.
Yeah, fantastic. Lance, have you got a story to top that one? That's fantastic.
No, it just brings back a lot of memories of when you've had really successful nights. But mine were a bit tame, but no, I've always been, I've always had a bit of a tie with Brian over the years, also. But Vinny was a good bloke, and the only time first time he ever spoke to me was in the SA Cup, just before the Cup. He'd been suspended, and he had Trevor Dove driving Trevor's Choice, and it was equal favourite with My Lightning Blue at the Cup that year, and
Jimmy O'Sullivan.
Vinny come up to me and said, because Whirly Dreams all barriers sick outside the front row at Meadow Globe Derby, and Vinny knew that Whirly had a bit of speed, and Trev's Choice was in 4, probably looked the leader, and Vinny said, I know you're coming out, you're 16 to 1 or something. Said something along the lines of, "I'll put a couple of $100 on Trev's Choice for you if you don't rush out the start." And I said, "Vinny, you probably get better value putting $100 each way on Whirly 16s." And that's all I said. And he just sort of laughed and walked off. That was really the first time he spoke to me. But we did become pretty good friends through the Mildura trips, as Brian will remember them sort of trips. And drivers' challenges. He went on a few of those things. And, yeah, so we got to know each other pretty well. But yeah, he was a talent that was. He was out there. I'm going to say he was more the showman than talented. Maybe I'm not sure. Yeah. He was just so. He was just so out there. He could attract the attention of the room when he walked in by just being there. His presence was epic.
Incredible. We might finish on this one, gents. Brian and Lance have skin in the game. So what's your advice to keeping that winning flame? We've obviously got a lot of younger drivers, a lot of younger trainers, a lot of hobby trainers. We might start with you actually on this one, Bruce. What would be your advice to a young driver coming through, or a young trainer coming through that sort of would like a bit of, experience and things like that? Would be your sort of words of wisdom for them?
Well, I think the main thing is that you get under the tutelage of experienced people above you, and if you go and you work underneath those people, there's so many things that they can teach you to do, and do it the right way. And the main thing to remember is that these people have so much experience, and to go and ask them, and there's so many of those older drivers and trainers that have amazing records, and they're only too pleased to give you good advice on the way to do it. The way racing is at the present time, because there's so much money for juvenile racing, it's very easy to be an attack driver all the time, because there's so much speed of the young horses nowadays. So to go and talk to these trainers that have experience, like Lance and like Brian has, but in my day there was the likes of a Gordon Rothicker and a George Gath and these people, and they were only too pleased to give you advice on what you should and how to conduct yourself when you go to the races. It's very important, and people that are looking about to give you drives, they look at you and they see how you conduct yourself and how you should be polite and have respect for those older people.
Yeah, lovely. Fantastic words there, Bruce. Brian, what's the advice you give to Louis and Matthew when they sort of come around and say, how did you think of this drive, and what was your sort of thoughts on that?
Oh, well, a bit like Bruce said, that you don't want to overburden with how you want the horse driven, because there's always 2 or 3 different things in a race. It all changes when the gate opens and that. But I just love watching the young drivers. We've got some super drivers coming along, and like Bruce said, be very polite, always be obliged, and don't be afraid to out of your way to help an older trainer yoke his horse up, or help unyoke and all that. Those people take notice of you. Young drivers may think no one's looking at you because you might have drove 1 winner, 2 winners, but believe you me, everyone watches you, and if you're obliging and you drive fairly good, don't you be surprised how all of a sudden you start getting 1 drive, 3 or 4 drives. The next minute you're driving at every meeting. And because with these junior drivers claim they have, and they get plenty of opportunities and plenty of practice, and I see some of them start out sort of not sure what they're doing, and not long. They're lucky because they can study videos, do the form properly, learn to do the form, and what horses lead the gate quickly and what don't. And some drivers like to bustle their horses early and some don't. So take notice as not only the horses, but how most drivers have a set plan and they don't change much. And some are aggressive drivers, some are not. And you've got to learn all that and realise that sometimes, I used to look at a horse that I was going to drive. I watch it and I'd say to myself, gee, I think if I drove that horse, I'd drive it like Bill Shin would. Sometimes I used to copy other drivers to suit that type of horse, or Gordon Ruffiger, or Dave Wilson, or Teddy Demler, or I watched all the good drivers, and I wasn't afraid to adapt to how they drove on a certain type of horse.
No, fantastic words of advice there, Brian. And I think look after yourself, but also make sure you seek advice. Lance Leilani comes up to you with a bit of advice and says, Dad, I need a bit of help with this. What sort of wisdom do you sort of give off?
Oh, it depends what she's driving, but I try and tell her to if she drive the horse to his capabilities. If he's an average horse, try and take the shortcuts as he used to in the old days. But if you think he's a chance and he's got a bit of bottom, keep him out in the open if you can. Try and driving. But as like Brian said, you can't weigh kids down with instructions. They've got to learn on their own. They've got to experience it and pick it up, but they'll work it out. My advice to her is, if you're driving a bad horse and you're in the field, pick out the best driver or the luckiest driver on the day. Drivers have runs. Some drivers will be doing really well on a day. If he's won 3 race and he's driving a reasonable horse, following him, you'll get a good run through. And if you're not good enough to win, you'll be in the best possible spot. But my other advice to him is, as Brian said, don't be frightened to go out and help some other trainer or even offer it'd be good if you could work for an outside stable, because kids, fathers and daughters and fathers and sons, they don't like to take advice off their fathers that much. They tend to get too close, and often wakes them up a little bit if they can go to another stable and get some outside experience. That usually gives them a bit of a shake up.
No, fantastic advice there, Lance. And just our last sponsor, Sharps Bakery, Best Bets. I'll be going race 1, Catch a Wave. And Lance, I'll give you this one. Are you going to tip one from the own stable, or are you going to go somewhere else?
Diane's got so what in on the free for all. It's $34. Put $1 the place on and see how you go.
Done. Catch a Wave and so what. It's been an absolute honour, gentlemen. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Brian, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bruce, it's an incredible honour to have you on. So thank you, Bruce.
Thanks very much, Lockie. Pleasure to have been on.
And what can I say, my old mate? Thank you very much.
I just want to say one thing. It's a great honour to be on with these two legends, because what you don't realise, Lockie, I used to watch these guys when I was younger. Before I could get in the gate to watch Gammalite win one of his cups in Adelaide, and they wouldn't even let me down the stalls.
Mm.
And Brian, I remember watching Brian on a little horse that I adored. I thought he was fantastic, Rodillo Bronze. He raced against Murray's Idol in I think it was a Derby heat, and I was always a fan of Brian's sort of there well after that.
No, it's an absolute honour for me to conduct this and just listen to the stories. It's been amazing. I'd like to thank all the listeners. Thank you. We'll be back with 20 questions next week.